Radio OKiTALK, Radio OKiTALK, von Mensch zu Mensch.
Welcome. The Wizard of Oz edition 6 with Bryan. Hello and welcome, Bryan. How are you?
Hi, Raphael. Glad to be here as always, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It'll be fun.
Indeed. So this is our second edition, in a sense, on channeling, mediumship, invocation, evocation. As Jim joined us for some lively talk last time, of course, there is much more we may explore. So therefore, I would simply let you lead the charge in terms of continuing explaining these topics and the differences and whatever else you would like to outline.
Well, before we dive straight into those, I just wanted to talk to you about something astrological that was happening right now that's really having a very profound effect all over the world, and certainly in my personal world is like, wow, it's really feeling it. And that is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. They are both at 22 degrees in Capricorn. And they went into that like a day or so after the last lunar eclipse. So a lot of astrologers are saying this is the biggest astrological event of the year, and you know, Saturn, the greater malefic. You know, Saturn is a really hardcore energy. You know, it's about karma. It's about stopping things that don't work, and you know, and Pluto is, Pluto. So that conjunction is about wrecking and kind of breaking down constructs that don't work, whether those are personal constructs, relationships. I know a bunch of people that are having some serious relationships issues right now. Could be jobs, and you know, that's sort of on a personal level, but also in a global level. You're seeing governments just at the edge of collapse, and revolutions and of all kinds, and lots of different places across the globe. And that is one of the downfalls of this. The good news on the other side of that is that once those constructs get torn down that don't work, those planets do a really good job of rebuilding and setting up constructs that actually function in a healthy and productive way. One of the other things for me, for my own personal intensity with this, is my Mercury also happens to be at 22 degrees Capricorn. So the combo of all of those planets has just been kind of rocking my little world here. And it's going to go on. You know, those planets don't move. They move very, very slowly. So they're not going to be going really fast. And then the next thing to kind of be aware of with Saturn is coming up this next May. It is going to be in Aquarius and staying in Aquarius for a long time, which happens to be my sign also. So, ooh. And then shortly after Saturn goes there, it's going to be joined by Mars, which is going to be a bit of an upheaval. At least the possibility of an upheaval. You know, if you kind of try to get your ducks in a row before then, you can kind of mitigate some of those intensities. But right at the beginning, especially like the first couple weeks, expect a stormy sea, because it's going to be a little rocky and windy. But as always, the stars change. But just a little heads up on that. And you experiencing any of the Pluto Saturn thing, Raphael?
Well, first of all, thank you, of course, for bringing us back into the now. I usually live in the future, so I was already talking about the things we're going to talk about later, although, of course, also this is all very much related. Specifically, what I can say is that usually I feel, even though I would say I'm quite empathetic, also quite well, let's say, segregated from the mass consciousness. However, this particular switch I definitely felt on various levels. I was extremely tired that weekend. It was kind of funny. And also, basically, it expedited, let's say, some rearrangement in my teeth. So I basically got a teeth pulled because of wisdom teeth, let's say. Wisdom teeth is still there. So that's one discrete and only tiny bit painful happening I had there. And what's pretty cool is, because I have such an awesome dentist, is that she actually told me and was like, "Oh, it's great. You're just here now just after the full moon." And I was like, "Oh yeah, right. I didn't even think about it that way." Because of course also these things can be related and may help, and shows us again how we are in sync with all the planets and the stars, at least to some degree, or how we can resonate with them. And just Saturn and Pluto, of course, many things happening all around. And as I understand the idea of structure and limitation in terms of Saturn, and the idea of revolution, and even the Fool card himself is also Pluto, no?
Yes.
Yeah, so there we have the correlation. So of course then for me, and I know, for example, individuals like Michael Tessarian, this is where I initially got the concept from, that basically Pluto has entered a certain sign or a certain period since maybe like 10 or 20 years, something along these lines. And that this, of course, is a great sign of, let's say, great upheaval and potential chaos. However, always depends from what side you're looking at it. And even in an overly ordered system, if it's ordered in a negative sense, then some chaos to allow it to restructure in a positive polarization may actually be very beneficial. So to me, this combination brings great, let's say, I wouldn't even say hope, but great conviction or great reassurance that we are truly reconstructing something right here and now. And that's what happens on a societal level right now, on individual level, most certainly. So in a sense, until now, I kind of got away easy, quote unquote, or I'm doing my homework well enough that it's not too rough. But I certainly also felt something, which is a bit strange for me because I'm not often that connected to these generalized ideas, in my perspective, at least.
Well, one of the other things that's kind of really intense about those, if those planets were in conjunction anywhere, it would be intense. But the fact that it's in Earth, in Capricorn, which is the place that things materialize, it's really affecting the physical world of people personally and collectively as well. So kind of intense. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because it happens to be right there in front of me. So let's move into the mediumship and the channeling areas. And kind of let's just start with a couple of definitions that are, and these, you may disagree with these, but these are my definitions for these. Mediumship for me, pretty much 99% of the people that I know that call themselves mediums, what they're referring to is speaking with spirits, human spirits that have moved on and are in some other place, and they're able to contact those individuals. Whereas channeling is more of a reaching out astrally and connecting with many other kinds of beings, aliens, spiritual beings, uh, and not just in this time frame. There are beings that are ahead of us, that you can connect with and communicate with and get information with. Um, so uh, my experience with mediumship is, well, okay. I'll just give you my true thoughts on this. I've been really most of my life. I've been really kind of skeptical of the mediumship thing because it seems.
Says the individual dabbling in elemental magic, just to briefly mention that again.
Yes, exactly. I've run across a lot of people that call themselves mediums, but in fact are doing trickery. And there's lots of there's lots of little scam things that you could do to try to convince you're talking to their loved ones when they are in fact not. They're not talking.
One great example, just to outline that, because of course, as with all practices, you always have those with pure and honest intentions, and usually also those that just try to manipulate you, get some money, get some power, get some fear out of you. Of course, these coexist, and it's important maybe, not to put them all into one category, but just to give one example about how this can be done in particular is, I don't even know the name of the guy, I forgot, but a nice video where one of those, I would say, supposed mediums is talking to a group, and he's in, I believe, in Ireland or an Irish community, and then he's asked, "Oh, is there somewhere here I get something? Is someone here called something like O'Neill or O'Connell or something?" It's like the most obvious names, and then basically goes along kind of these things, which I guess is known as cold reading, I believe, and.
Yes.
And then maybe to correlate it, because even in tarot, or also when I do conscious channeling, which I again do as honest and positively as I can, no matter how ignorant I am, it is possible, that hints come up, or you just, kind of getting along and ask for feedback. So that's not an unusual or bad thing in itself. But there you could really kind of see how it's gonna kind of being set up, to hit some emotional buttons and get the interaction going in the way that this guy wanted to. At least that's how it looked to me. So it's always interesting to check out these.
That's been the majority of my experience. Situations exactly like that. Some people are better at it than others, but I would say maybe 2 or 3% of the people that I've interacted with I would say are genuine. It's kind of a strange area. Now, when you actually really do, I do know a small number of mediums that are really very good. As a matter of fact, I dated a very good one who does readings for a lot of celebrities and stuff like that. She does really well with it, but she's also really good at it too, and she does a regular thing down in Arizona at one of the metaphysical spa retreat places, and during the course of that day, she would read for 5 or 6 people, and it was very, very bizarre when she would come home and all of a sudden she would be conversing with me, but she was using different inflections in her voice. She was using different terminology and phrasing of words that I hadn't really heard her put together like that. And would have this really strange, like she was someone else. And what we wound up figuring out was that she was, during the course of that time, you go into someone's astral field, you're connected to a lot of stuff. And she would bring back in her aura, like the feelings of whoever she had channeled for her client. And we actually got really, that was kind of really good practice, because we got to a point where pretty much every time she would do one of her sessions, I would do a full aura cleansing for her, which was really fantastic to be able to do, especially when we got really good at doing it long distance. And it really highlighted the fact that on the astral zone, there is no distance. It really doesn't matter, if you're in Vienna or she was in Arizona, or I have the person right here in front of us, front of me rather, you can still make that connection, and I often asked her this question, like, what I know of the afterlife and what happens when you go, I it's not like people stick around. I don't think. I think they get on with their business, and maybe there's a few of them but that do. But I wonder many times if the being that they're actually contacting are just some other kind of spirit that are really good at masquerading, and most of the mediums that I have interacted with have given me such general information that there wasn't really any way to oh yeah, that's absolutely for sure. My medium friend, when she convinced me, she called up a friend of mine that I had not brought up to her at all. And she just kind of went into this really weird space. It wasn't like we were setting up to have a session. Excuse me. And she looked at me and her eyes kind of went glazed over a little bit. She sort of went back and she took on the posture of this friend of mine that had passed away. And we used to have a joke with each other. We were sort of the fuck you means I love you school of giving affection. So he would always show up. First thing he would do when he saw me is Lahr, and he'd flip me off. And he would get this particular kind of silly, jokey posture, and it was so specific. And I swear she took on that exact posture, looked me right in the eye and went, Lahr, fuck off. I'm like, whoa, and kind of took on his tone of voice. It was very, very, it's just surprising that this came out. And, over the course of the next 30 minutes, I actually had a conversation with him about some stuff. He and I had kind of a fight at the very end of our relationship, and we had not really spoken in a few years when he passed, because we're both stubborn bastards. And she brought that up in the middle of this conversation, and the details of that fight, and he and I got to resolve that, which I have to say was such a freeing release for me to have unresolved issues sort of absolutely, in my mind, they were absolutely resolved for both of us, which was amazing. And she just kept going on and bringing out more stuff. And it wasn't any of the, oh, he's showing me roses, which means he's telling me he loves you, just want you to know everything's going to be okay. Well, yeah, okay. I sort of knew that already, so to get really specific information was very unusual. Yeah, so I would just say, if you're going to interact with a medium, bring your guy from Missouri, from the Show Me State, and make sure you keep your healthy discernment activated and scoped out. You'll know really quickly whether it's for real or whether it's just general gobbledygook that could apply to anything. And I would not like to be disparaging about about mediumship, because I think it's a really incredible tool. And most of the people that I know that, well, let me think about that. Actually, every single person that I know that is a genuine medium, in my opinion, um, kind of got to that place through some traumatic event. Like the woman that I was just describing had a really intense car accident. Up until that time, she had been a local TV news anchor and was not involved in that world at all. And she had a really, really bad accident, went into, was unconscious. She wasn't actually in a coma, but she was unconscious for a couple of days. And when she came back out of that, she said she saw the entire room full of relatives of hers that had transitioned, and she started talking to these spirits, and it was a little weird for her at first, but it was very comforting also, and she wound up finding this whole space for herself that really changed her world, and a lot of other people that she's read for. And you know, that's kind of an interesting correlation that I have found. Have you noticed that at all? Do you know enough to enough mediums to have made an assertion on that yourself, Raphael?
What's interesting is that I'm only familiar with, let's say, a few channelers, which also I would basically agree with the definition, interestingly enough, that usually when people talk of mediumship, they oftentimes seem to be speaking about, basically, I would now say, channeling dead people. Although we can also then argue if someone is channeling either an Atlantean priest or some alien from the future, to us, they're also dead in a sense. So they're not on this plane. So even here we have some connections. My personal experience with individuals actually describing themselves as mediums, interestingly enough, only happened when I was in your country of the United States of America. And the very first thing was, the first few days I was walking around in New York City, and I had never seen like a random, I believe in Brooklyn or something, a random sign that says, yeah, whatever, channeled reading or something, $10. And I was like, okay, I didn't have much money, but you know, before I get a burger or something, that's of course what I'm gonna do, especially because I was so flabbergasted to just see that public in the open.
Right?
And I was like, okay, cool, you know, I gotta go there. So I go there, I'm like looking there, apparently there's a TV running inside, and then some woman comes, but she was like really tiny, I would say, in terms of quote unquote ethnicity. And me myself, the chose about this that to differentiate, so we get it the right way, but some variant, let's say, of a quote unquote gypsy appearance, really tiny woman. And apparently she was watching TV or something, and she came out and was like, yeah, whatever. And then they're like, yeah, this and that, $10. She was like, no, that's not available today, only $15. I was like, yeah, sure, you know, that's the first trick, but you know, $5, that's all right. And so I was like, sure, let's go. Yeah. And then we sat down or something. And what I just thought is like, oh my God, this woman, in my strange view, has almost no solar plexus energy. Like she almost effing isn't even there. This was my impression of her. And it was like, okay, she's tuning, and she started reading. She started talking about the trip I was about to have, you know, in terms of meeting people and quote unquote having an impact or whatever, which in a sense happened, but also what I was expecting. You know, I was dressed up like all in colors and so on. What she said about 3 times is, yeah, you're very spiritual. You have this ability or something. Do you know that? And I'm like, yeah. And then she mentioned it like 3 times. You could also kind of, you know, guess that or say that's something because of, you know, the way I'm dressed or something, but still. And then she said something funny about an ex-girlfriend, and at least she got the first letter correct, actually. Which is maybe also not too hard, but still was kind of interesting the way she came about it and mentioned it. And yeah, so there were a few things where I could say, even right at the spot and also in retrospect, she was quote unquote right. Maybe you can give your guess in terms of how much cold or hot or whatever reading that was, or mediumship or channeling or something. This wasn't now talking to someone who's dead, but more like, give me random information, read my palm or something. But what she did then is she was like, yeah, because she said she was mentioning this girl, and then said, yeah, she's blocking your energy. And I was like, girl, like, to her in my mind, I was like, yeah, now you're gonna start with your tricks or something. She's like, yeah, I can clean your aura. It's just $10 more. And I was like,
right.
yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm good. I mean, this was impressive enough. I'm good. Thank you for, showing whatever you got, but, I'll deal with this myself. And I don't believe generally, I'm very wary of accepting any, negative beliefs out of anyone. It's one thing, to be honest with oneself and ever more exact, but it's another thing if someone in any type of channeling or something starts to propose some negative belief systems for you. It's really important then to discern for yourself, to be honest and see, okay, is there something which may be fixed or something, or is it just a fear that the other party tries to create, just so then, of course, they offer me the solution. I mean, it's perfect marketing ploy, of course, at this point.
I was just going to say, the people that have those storefronts are really expensive, man, especially in New York City. So she's got to make the rent every month. And as soon as it becomes attached to money, my suspect radar goes into high, and all of a sudden, as soon as it's for money, the altruistic aspect of doing it because you want to connect with somebody else and give their information is out the door. And now you have cash I need, and what can I tell you to get it, is kind of like the mindset of that. And those guys, I've never gone to one of those storefront people like that I felt like they were really good at what they did and the way they made a living, but were they genuine spiritual people that really had skills? For me, the answer would be absolutely not. They're all about the game of it rather than the reality of it, and unfortunately for me, it's like anybody that is telling you something's wrong and they're offering you a solution for cash, no, that's not happening.
I mean, at the same time, even also, this, of course, even those quote unquote spiritual individuals, quote unquote light workers and so on, potentially may also wish to buy food or pay rent. So it can always be good if there is, energy exchange happening, so everyone can continue to live even more abundantly. However, of course, at times it's an obvious marketing ploy. What is interesting to me is that in my impression, I could well believe that she was connecting to some things, although even here, even as you were explaining your example with the medium, well, we could then say, okay, either she's connecting to that quote unquote that individual, or she's really well connecting to your brain synchronization and kind of reading off the cue of your memories of what you're connecting with that individual and then playing that back. I'm not making something up.
I think that happens in a huge percentage of the time. I think you're absolutely right.
But even here, it's just an arbitrary differentiation again between the etheric realm and the physical realm, because anyhow it's all one and connected. But just to also kind of show how we can play around with this perspective and then what is coming from where. Either, everything is just information gathered from the physical world, but if the physical world actually is spirit, then everything is channeled and everyone is channeling everything all the time. It's really just a matter of definition and of tuning, and I would really say, of course, most importantly, of individual alignment and whether individuals want to be honest and whether individuals are willing to discern whether they are honest to themselves and whether someone else is honest to them. So in this example that I gave, I could well believe that she probably picked up on some things, and this may not have been completely calculated cold reading the way I was seeing her, also because she was like looking pretty strange, and I can well believe she can connect because, as I said, in terms of aura, it almost seemed like she's not there physically. So, but then still, of course, you add these things together, and I would guess oftentimes it's also mixed. And she just, basically couldn't read me well enough, because then she would have known that there is, no way I'm going to keep paying her for, extra aura cleansing or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's my experience in terms of firsthand. And one more thing, which happened a bit later during that voyage, which again, parts of it happened the way she said, because she wouldn't necessarily have known that I'm actually going to trip all around the country, which I did. She didn't get my itinerary or something. But anyhow, then I also met some other mediums later at a session. I was also invited, and they were also kind of channeling quote unquote dead individuals. And I also sat down there like as a part of it. I didn't really understand what they're doing first. And I was kind of like, I don't know, thrown amidst of it because they were looking for like specific symbols and relations. And I mean, I got some things at some point, but I wasn't really trusting that process. The women there seem to be more apt at it or more tuned to that particular, let's say, line of inquiry. So that's the one other example I had. Can't say how good they were. I would say generally genuine, and it seemed also somewhat accurate. And then just to confirm what you mentioned about whether they actually stick around, what Bashar usually says is that individuals, when they quote unquote transition, they usually don't stick around, and because their soul or entity is so much greater, they just remove their focus from the physicalized plane, and then in terms of that personality construct has not too much interest or relevance anymore to stick around etherically. At the same time, of course, everything is connected, everything is one, meaning that you can always connect to anyone, even you would say is quote unquote dead, because as a matter of fact, they're merely even right now living, even still physically, simply in another time-space coordinate right now. And also, of course, they're available on some level etherically if all is one consciousness. And then what we have, and even Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar, made a movie about this. I think this was the first movie his company Zia Films produced. It's called Dearly Departed. And there it's kind of a fun thing to interview recently or not so recently deceased individuals in the astral and kind of ask them about their life and what they did and where they maybe did something wrong. And here it's all about resolving their trauma and assisting them so they can actually transition. So Bashar also mentions this idea, even in their future version of Earth and so on, this concept of so-called banshees and other ideas of kind of getting trapped between worlds. Me personally, I like not putting too much fear or focus on that idea, but it seems it's quite well documented that something along these lines actually may also exist somehow, or at least many humans then creating stories maybe where they need to resolve something, and maybe the personality construct of that soul kind of sticks around more strongly also to assist resolving that. There I'm not so sure how important it really is for that individual that already died, because anyhow they're already in spirit and on so many other levels incarnating on other planets and just being an angel.
Already dealing with the stuff that's next. That was one of the most, out of all of the years I've been on the path, one of the most profound things that happened with me with the person I'm learning with now was they take you to your actual death, and you see your death, and you go to the place that you start to show up immediately after. And it was so not about thinking about this place anymore at all. It was like, man, move on. And the things that then transpire, and the next course of evolution that your spirit is in at that period of time, so unconcerned with what's happening here and your old existence. You're kind of like thrust into this, wow, this is different, and so that's always sort of confused me about that too. I've never one to just evaluate how other people are doing it. I always want to try it out for myself as well. So I did do some. This has been a good while, but I did some medium explorations myself, and had some pretty decent results with it. But a couple of curious things that came out of those sessions for me. One, one of the ways that I evaluate everyone around me now is by seeing their aura and their astral light. You know, you were talking about that girl's solar plexus energy. You know, I keep that frequency just a little notch on the dial away. And if I'm meeting someone new or looking at my friends and seeing how they're doing, you know, I turn that on and I'm looking at their aura as much as I am their physical body. So I brought that to bear as well on my experiments with mediumship and the spirits that I wound up connecting to. You know, a lot of mediums don't really get visuals. Sometimes the people are talking to them, or they don't get a visual of the person, but they get symbols, you know, like the bouquet of roses, you know, showing me roses, you know, symbolically. But for me, I actually was able to see the being that I was connected to, and looking at their aura at that particular point in time was a really, really telling bit of information. And a couple times it was like it was still a person, and I believed and forged ahead communicating with that entity as if it was a human. But there were also a number of times where other things showed up masquerading as a human, but their light so like was not human at all that I really bagged those experiments and got out of those as quickly as I could. The other thing that's kind of telling about, you know, you hear a lot of talk about people, you know, well, man, now they're, you know, once you die, you're going to know more. Well, that's not really the case. You know, it's like some of the spirits that stick around, you know, that energy doesn't stay congealed the way it does when you're in your physical body. And the longer that you wait outside of that before moving into the things that you need to be doing, the more diffused that energy winds up being. And, you know, asking questions, I found that the quality of the information, those spirits were not smarter. They didn't get more answers. They didn't know what was, some of them barely knew what was happening to them. They were getting more and more confused and didn't really understand what was going on with them. And I kind of thought that they were sort of stuck and caught in between the next place to go. So they were wandering around kind of lost, and they certainly didn't have more information. You know, that's for sure. You know, transitioning before we get into channeling, the last thing on the medium thing I wanted to talk about was Ouija boards, and that process of contacting spirits with a Ouija board. And the reason I bring that up is because just this past weekend, I wound up doing an exorcism for somebody who had been kind of obsessively using that Ouija board and got a really nasty attachment. And, you know, the Ouija board, like, because it was put out as a Milton Bradley game, you know, that's kind of how people look at it. Oh yeah, it'd be fun to do at a party, but just would like to put my 2 cents in on that. It is a really powerful spiritual tool, and it is like a door that you can open the door and let something come through. The cool thing about that is, you know, that you can contact dead people, and that's what people do that with a lot. But you can also reach other spiritual entities, and the breakdown for me happens, and the way this guy, you know, got trapped was starting off the session with, is anybody out there? You know, just kind of like, that's like opening the door to your front house and just putting out a sign that says free food. and seeing who shows up, you know. And the kind of entities that love those are, and I don't mean these are evil or they're like negative with ill intent, but there's a lot of spiritual beings on the astral that are looking to eat and to consume other energy. That's how they stay alive, you know. So you open that door and shoot out this bright glowing light out into the astral, you can attract a lot of things, good and bad. So I would like to caution everyone beforehand, if you're going to use that technique, kind of have in mind who you want to contact beforehand and use that as a structure. That's my favorite way to do it. Use that as a structure to contact a specific individual. You're much more likely to actually contact that being than if you just throw out an open-handed, is anybody out there? There's another method of doing that as well, where you could also pre-program it with the intent that only a positive spirit, you know, to show up, that nothing of a negative influence or lower frequency can manifest through this portal, that this is only a portal for light beings. And I've had pretty good success with that as well. Although I'm really never a fan of just throwing out the net and seeing what I get. I know a number of people, and there's been a lot of information about this on TV shows and stuff like that too. There is a phenomenon called the Zozo demon. Have you heard of that, Raphael?
Not specifically.
Yeah, the Zozo demon. Apparently, that's a demon that likes to come through, and has shown up across the world. There's quite a phenomena about it. It's spelled Z-O-Z-O. If you're interested, you know, Google it or YouTube it. There's just a plethora of people that have contacted that being, and that being has ill intent and is actively trying to attach to people. And even though people know that that's out there and do it, they're still doing it, you know. He becomes, the people that get attachments with him get really, really obsessive about the board, and they're wanting to do it like every day, then multiple times a day, and every time that happens, he gets to entwine with your energy even more, and that is a very difficult that's a very good, difficult spirit to get rid of. And I've been wondering whether that is in fact an actual demon, or whether that is a thought form that has been created by some of the first people putting that out and trying to kind of create a scare about it, and then more people got on top of it. And you know, if you're going to the board with expectation of, or fear, especially fear of connecting with that being, of course it's going to manifest. But it's equally possible, in my opinion, that I've never contacted that being. I have no desire or interest in connecting with that energy in the least. But I wonder if that's kind of a collective thought form, much like, you know, like the tarot. You know, the archetypes in the tarot have been used for so many decades, millennia, you know, that now they've actually taken on kind of a physicality that didn't exist because of the amount of energy and that the number of people that have used that system have poured into it with belief and intent that that's what it was. So anyway, I would just like to throw out a small cautionary thing on a Ouija board. Working with this guy this weekend, it was very brutal. It took a lot out of him, and he's been kind of dealing with it for like this last 6 months. And it's kind of, man, you just, if you're going to play with fire, make sure you have your fire resistant gloves on. you know. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Yes, I would say it is always about alignment and then discernment. And also, of course, I would assume maybe some of them just want to play around with it. By now, it certainly, obviously, I would say, is a collective thought form. Even us speaking about it or doing an internet search, there's quite a few things showing up. So by now, certainly it has taken on a life on its own. And of course, the other question would be is why are you even using that type of board? And most likely, if it's out of a fearful approach or just because you want to gain quote unquote personal power out of ignorance that you're already supremely connected and empowered, then of course, I can very well imagine it may be much more likely that these type of somewhat distorted, because again, to quote Bashar once again, what you put out is what you get back. So I would say that's, of course, very, very much correlating. And then here, in terms of what you mentioned, and thank you for also cautioning about this, then again, I would say protection invites attack. However, this then would not necessarily be so much the idea of protecting, but simply like the idea of discerning. So simply put
yes, tuning into a vibration that you want to connect with, rather than a random wide call that anything could show up. The board. I don't want to give the impression that I think a Ouija board is inherently evil. I think it's what you wind up sitting down to do with it. Like one of my favorite tools. I do one of my telekinetic exercises is spinning that rod on top of a rounded piece of glass around in circles, right? So I made my own circular Ouija board of my own construction that's in a circle.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I get the rod supercharged up and give it a good few spins so it has some energy about it, and then I start asking questions, and it's crazy, man. I just did that this weekend actually for something, and having it spell out something or give you a really specific number. It's great if you need a really specific answer, a short specific answer, rather than a broad, like the tarot. You get such a wide berth of different perspectives and pieces of information that build up to a whole. But this particular kind is really great for yes or no's, or give me a name, or that kind of thing, and that's been a really, really useful tool. But again, I don't open that gate. That's me and my higher self. That's not me and anybody else, and certainly not an open invitation to participate. So there we go.
Yeah, so while there may be a guardian of the threshold, as we already discussed, between this world and other worlds and the idea of spiritual development, I also very much see that each of us, in a sense, our higher self, also is, on another level, a guardian of the threshold, also within the astral, in terms of determining what is allowed in and what is not, what is resonant and what is not, who has the key pass and who does not.
Yeah, right. The facial recognition.
Right, the frequency tune alignment recognition system. I mean, there could even be many more stories about this. And we are here once again with Bryan Lahr, the Wizard of Odd, edition 6. Once again, speaking about channeling, mediumship, and everything related. Bryan.
Odd indeed. Yeah. Hey, are you cold? What's the weather like where you're at? Just out of curiosity. Are you cold? Are you cold?
Well, yeah, it's just about freezing point, and there's mist.
Oh, awesome! is amazing. We're having a what you would call a cold snap in Miami. It's down in the 50s, and it's the sky and the air is so free of humidity, and it's just like this crystal color. Love, love, love this time of year, man. From the solstice till about end of March, it is just glorious, glorious, glorious. No snow though, thank goodness. I lived in Buffalo, New York for a couple of years, and that was all the snow I needed for the rest of my life. Okay, channeling. So, in my opinion, of the four things that we've spent some time talking about, evocation, invocation, mediumship, I think channeling personally is my favorite, and I find my most useful astral tool. And for me, that process is, you know, going to your radio dial and tuning in a frequency. I again don't usually put out I don't do a reach out looking for a random connection. I'm usually looking for a more specific uh, contact, and that, like with the tarot deck, I channeled all of the archetypes from the major arcana with the angels. I channel them almost on a nightly basis, and those modes of communication are really, really, really clear, and have so far been really accurate, and I'm never wondering who I've actually connected with. That's always kind of I don't say that like connecting with someone random would be evil, but it's just like I like knowing who I'm gonna be talking to, and I know that there's so many channelers, man. You do a search on YouTube for channelers, and God, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that are putting out channeling things, and all of them have advice for other people, for the world at large, and I'm not sure that's actually valid. I think sometimes a lot of those channels, we're all our singular universes, even as we're parts of this greater universe. But inside of us, like we were talking about the Saturn Pluto malefic, we're not really talking about the actual planet that's out in space, talking about, again, the archetype of that energy and what that planetary system means, and those stars and that whole cosmology that lives inside of us, not outside of us. So, I wonder sometimes about the validity of that information. Listen to all of those different channeling things, and there's so many different expressions of what somebody thinks, and I wonder sometimes if that's actually an outside entity, or whether that's part of their subconscious that's actually speaking through them and giving them information for themselves. Go ahead.
Well, let me ask you, ultimately, would there be anything that is outside that which right now is not conscious to you?
Absolutely. I think your whole subconscious world is working alongside your conscious world. That's part of been my reason for going through the thing with the Carl Jung's Red Book, and why I've spent an enormous amount of time resolving and assimilating my shadow side, because that's always running at a I mean, you can access that if you want to go get it, but it's as we're consciously sitting here talking, both of our subconsciouses are working on other stuff that I'm not aware of right now. Perhaps you are.
Well, gladly, to a large extent. Also, I don't have to be aware of that. The image I would like to convey is maybe actually, let's say, an upside down pyramid, and we're at the very tip of the pyramid, however, at the quote unquote lowest part. And then anything that is subconscious to us would be the higher aspect, so the larger part of that pyramid. However, that would not only include our own subconscious, but also any and all other entities we cannot perceive right now. So I would very much say it's potentially the same. Can you catch my drift?
Yes.
Now you're muted.
Yes, I did. I do catch your drift. I'm not sure I agree wholeheartedly with that, but I would give it a yes. I'm still very much in a let's explore this genre scenario, because there are definitely my own experience, man. I have used that to great result, and I know some channelers that are just amazing in their accuracy. But another thing with those people, there are some elements of it that are generalities and large general big picture stuff. But the people I'm referring to also just have this ability to come out with really like verifiable, like, man, okay, yeah, that is exactly true. Because a lot of the stuff that gets put forth, accepting that as truth based on someone else's communication with another being, I'm not. I need some setup with that before, or confirmation with that before I will accept that into my realm of truth. Do you have any? Yeah.
Your phone is ringing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
Oh, really?
Here, let me turn that off.
I can hear it. It's another sign from somewhere within our subconscious.
Yeah.
So can you just make sure to mute yourself? And
I did.
Also,
okay.
Yes. Now, yes. Thank you so much. So basically, just to maybe give a little foray into this topic as well, I have to disclose at this point, as you very well know, I also do conscious channeling, not in this waking state now, not necessarily claiming whatever I'm doing. There's a descriptor about it in terms of what is happening. And then we can very much get into this idea in terms of getting specific information. I would say I'm quote unquote pretty bad at doing that, but also in a sense because I'm not overly interested in that, because also I don't want to get anyone to get lost in details, which ultimately, in my view, are not relevant. I very much look at it in terms of what is the basis of reality, what are the basic structures, where then one could say, okay, this is just generalized stuff. That's true. But in terms of the provability, what kind of turned it around for me was, of course, me getting into quote unquote contact with Bashar. And even though, he's also giving lots of specifics, he even made some quote unquote energy reading probability predictions that turned out to be very, very accurate. However, even leaving all of that aside, the basic idea of structures he's talking about, and let's say the basic quality of life advice and perspective advice and psychology advice, that is also, of course, overlapping with many other channelers, much other material, and also many other aspects of religions, the positive parts. This actually can be verified by applying it. So it is not something where someone else can even prove it to you, no matter who they claim to be communicating with, and the alien says, or the angel says, or your dead neighbor says something. It doesn't matter. And also it doesn't matter that it's a generalized concept, like Bashar always says, follow your excitement with integrity, without expectation on the outcome, because it is type of a master key system. And also this may not necessarily work for everyone. However, if you do apply it, and you're not a very, very rare case, and actually properly apply the whole formula and not leave something out, then, for example, with this particular tool, anyone that actually does it and really understands it and acts like it reaps the results. And others just call this, the flow state or whatever, and we don't have to mystify it. But I would say this also relevance of generalized ideas is very much important, especially also maybe within a time, and this may be another explanation, maybe why there's many channelers coming up, of course, with, different alignment and different degrees of clarity, which again is an exercise in discernment for the entire audience and the entire population. However, it may also be that much of this, let's say, quote unquote, generalized positive information is being repeated, ideally in a sense that is empowering and not disempowering, may also simply because at the very same time, we have so much quote unquote, directly and obviously negative and divisive propaganda that in a sense, the collective consciousness as a whole, I could very well relate, would also just say, even if you don't get specifics or whatever, you just get, good feelings and all is well. But that may be equally important at a time like this. What do you think about that?
Well, certainly the confirmation that all is well is certainly awesome. I go back to my question whether that was intended for people at large or whether that was a communication for you.
Right. Well, from my point of view, at least in the way I structure the channelings when I do them, is you're not muted yet, Bryan, just to let you know, because you're on voice activated, and then yes, thank you, it always goes on and off. Is that I very much actually use, I would say now, a type of logical reasoning capacity. And of course, this is not something like universal laws in terms of your own existence. What you put out is what you get back. Everything is here and now. Now I'm even forgetting it. These are the only laws, and change is the only constant, and the one is all, the all are one. Stuff like that. It is not an idea of believing something nice to me. It is something that can be logically thought through and conclusively. And it's also that can be applied in terms of internal worldview reasoning, along with some tools like following your excitement, for example. And that then simply through experience and individual phenomenology checks out, I have to say, with those individuals I'm in contact with that are actually applying it in pretty much all cases, and many others basically following very similar ideas, just not naming or framing them in that way, which of course is not important at all, but also just, leading a good life because they apply some of these principles. Some may then call them Buddhist or even Christian or whatever, certain aspects of it. But some of these things just is in general seem to be pretty good ideas. Like, for example, doing what you love and not constantly doing stuff you really don't like and trying to conform, for example.
Well, I would agree wholeheartedly, and those things do in fact really light you up. And I think the critical thing that you've said a couple times, and I agree wholeheartedly with, is you do follow your excitement. It's like when I'm listening to whoever, and they say something that like lights my solar plexus. That's something I want to like take into account. If it doesn't, then I don't find myself wanting to. I readily accept those things that light up my being as truth for me, and if it doesn't, then it goes in a we'll see later. It's more
Yes.
more to come.
And this is so great that you mentioned this, because this is a type of energy sensing that I'm very certain everyone listening has experienced in some way, shape, or form, and may now become even more conscious of it, because this actually is the intuitive side of it. So there is the one side which is logical. Then one can say, okay, for me, Hermetic law really makes sense, or this and that system. I kind of screened it to remove some dogma out of it. Then I can use it. So I have a strong logical framework. However, at the very same time, you have, of course, the intuitive faculty, which is equally relevant and maybe imbalance, and they may balance each other out. And then the intuitive faculty may simply, on a very direct level, just tell you, is this resonant and relevant for me or not? And this can then even go against any type of logic one may have constructed or appear to be in contradiction. But then using these tools in conjunction, using them is really great, or even just tells you immediately, oh, intuitively this feels strange. And then you maybe check it back against your logical system, and either that has to be reconstructed, or you actually think it through and then can really find out why this information was bothering you, or why exactly it's also logically not checking out and not only intuitively, then it's always this co-creative process between your intuition and a somewhat ideally conscious, constant reconstruction of one's own belief systems, if especially we assume that beliefs will certainly determine how you experience reality, and as it seems even determine the entirety of your parallel Earth experience, in my view, once again. But certainly these processes are immediately relevant to one's own quality of life.
Absolutely. Hey, I know that, channeling is something that you've been doing for some time now. I wondered if you would share a little bit about how you prepare and your actual process of doing it, if you would.
Sure. I'm not sure if maybe did we ever speak about it privately, just to let me know?
I don't believe we did, no.
Great, it's a first. All the audience can listen as well. Briefly, what I do is also, so as much as I feel resonant with these ideas and connected, for example, to Sosani, Sirius, and some others in terms of the stories and precisely this intuitive resonance, and even now I could, it's very, every artist or some artists may be the most critical of their own work. And I like to, in a sense, apply the same measure. So depending on how I would now construct the stories, I could either pull up a grand story of how I'm being contacted and in connection and sharing dream time with these certain beings or stories and synchronicities. I could also put it up in the other way and may appear to be completely ignorant, disconnected, a fool or a trickster or whatever. So I am very well aware of these different perspectives myself. So what I, in a sense, do for the channeling, and this is my, let's say, general life approach, also because the motto I'm using is act like you know. So the unity of method and wisdom. So no matter what you choose, no matter what you say you know about yourself, also act it out, because then it's anchored in reality. Also very much related to Om Mani Padme Hum, the jewel and the lotus, and of course the formula of acting on your highest excitement, and the hip hop saying of you better act like you know. So this is all very much related.
What a great combo. Awesome.
Yeah. So this is how basically I'm going along my own personal, ignorant synchronicity, just following the breadcrumbs in a sense. Or I do conscious channeling. So once again, this is not trance channeling as maybe Edgar Cayce or someone may have done. I remember what I do. I'm quite aware. I'm able to filter. I would be able to censor, although this is just the issue. The more I start thinking or picking it up or projecting something negative while I'm channeling, that's just usually disrupting the process, because I make very sure never to quote unquote allow anything really that is negative. Although nothing really comes in, my tuning in that sense works well. And then I just, replay whatever information, intuition I get. Sometimes in terms of, it's almost like I'm getting compressed zip files. Sometimes I'm also just blanking out and then just a few words. And if it's working quite well, then I also I noticed actually in retrospect, I get visuals. So visual concepts I then have to put into words. And all of that, having explained all of that, what I do is very, very simple, is aside from generally doing my very best to be well aligned and positive in terms of integrating everything and making a positive choice, even out of the negative experiences or whatever integration process, is I simply sit down, then I meditate for 1 or 2 minutes. And what I do is a visualization called Keys of Ascension. This was delivered by Bashar. And the very first few times I channeled, I didn't do it like that, but this was pretty quickly the structured process I put in. And what you do here is you simply visualize the different chakras. And you visualize certain platonic solids and other elements inside these chakras. And you go from the lowest, you basically start with like a dot, you make it into a line, you make it into a square, you make it into a cube. That's the first chakra. Then you move one chakra up, you make it into a pyramid, then another pyramid, and then other different structures until you reach above your head. And then eventually you visualize a white sphere, which is the idea of your higher self mind or your absolute empowered state. And this is again called Keys of Ascension by Bashar, delivered in about 1992, which is basically, according to him, used to amplify any type of process you wish to go into. And I just used it because I love Bashar. I like these type of visualizations, and I love just good graphics. So it's always fun for me to just look at that while I'm doing it. And the benefit for me is, as I'm projecting it into my body, aside from having fun and being able to smile about it, is that it's automatically aligning my spine and my muscles. So I can really tell, because I have at least some sensitivity for my energetic system and my body, that moving these up and then starting to spin them, and then I make six wings for myself. And that's also important, not just 2 or 4, but 6. And I can really tell, like by drawing all of that up and then some more, how my body is aligning properly, basically. So then I sit in a kind of whatever guru type position, not to look cool, but just because that's the aligned position. And so usually chest out and, straight sitting and so on. Then I just start breathing and breathe some more. Maybe briefly think about the specific symbol or idea or civilization that I wish to connect to, and then breathe even some more. And then at some point, just basically start with whatever first comes up, and then take it away from there. If that's the explanation you were seeking.
Are you looking for a specific connection, or are you throwing it out to, how do you select who you're channeling?
Yes. So basically, anytime I channel, I always know whom I'm going to connect to. And aside from my general alignment and my great trust in my own guardian of the threshold in terms of my higher self, that nothing quote unquote bad or negative can come in, I am simply choosing. So I'm usually either drawing a tarot card, then connecting with a specific so-called etheric civilization or human collective consciousness, or with your angel cards, very same thing. Or now I created a kind of let's say another intermediary, a switchboard operator consciousness, which I didn't name it, to be honest. It is named Ringo. That's the one thing it certainly did for itself. I may have mentioned this. So, but even this is in its general polarization for me, very, very much connected with a most positive version of my own higher self. And then that in itself would act as a gatekeeper as well. So I certainly always know whom I'm connecting to before I'm connecting.
When you first started, did you have any concern, or not concern's not the right word, but did you question whether you were actually connecting to another spirit, or did you know right away?
I'm also name dropped this here. There is a now woman called Roxanne Swainhard, Odyssey of Ascension. And what she does is conscious channeling in a very real and hardcore sense, to me at least, and very much relatable. And all I can say is, up to this point, I can question everything. Just as I said before, I could say, I am deluding myself and this is whatever, and it's, I don't know, for whatever, to gain popularity or something, even though that's not really checking out anyhow, so it wouldn't make sense too much, or to attract money or something, as that what it is. So for me, I can very much say I have no clue. However, at the very same time, logically looking at the whole thing and understanding the basis of reality and synchronicity, I also know I cannot not be connected. That is technically impossible. So therefore, if I am tuning myself at all, then at least to some degree, I would be shifting towards these type of frequencies, both in my waking consciousness in terms of integrating these ideas as much as I can, and then also in terms of the channeling states. And then, of course, we could speak, ideally, some of the individuals that experienced it should join at some point and just share their experiences rather than me talking about it.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Then there are, very interesting effects happening. And as so far, they have pretty much always ultimately been positive, and almost all of them also directly positive. All I can say is that, ultimately, if it serves, if it in any way, shape or form increases awareness and self-acceptance and love and cooperation and all of these things, and a good feeling and a fun time ultimately, then, what else could I wish for? And all other specificities and questions must then be resolved in time. That is kind of the way I see it.
Did you along the course of your journey, did you ever get do you have a gem or two that were like life changing for you, or particularly impactful in the way you lead your life? I had a couple at a while back after I had been doing it for a little while that really did change my life in a number of ways, and I've never lived life the same since those experiences. Have you had that happen as well?
Well, I would say, well, it is always in a sense, an iterative process, and there is spiraling up upon spiraling up and so-called revolution, but also always, truly improving the level in a sense. I had one particular experience, which is even documented on my website, through, interestingly enough, cannabis, basically. This was some years ago, and I had never really used it. And then basically I had again, I could stylize it and say it is an out-of-body experience or something. I could now explain what I saw, but basically in terms of my personal perception, I was perceiving some variant of my astral body and larger consciousness perspective upon this level of reality. And as I already was familiar with some philosophical and spiritual concepts and contemplating them, and then upon, at least for me, phenomenologically, experientially, seeing these things in a way I had not before, I then simply told myself, either I'm going completely crazy, or all of these ideas, which anyhow many people are talking about, are true. And then simply accepting my own experience and not denying any part of it and attempting to integrate all of it into one framework, then simply led me down this idea that even experientially and factually, let's say all is one, all is well, we are all connected, and the foundation of reality is unconditional love. And then from that point forward, I started already, quote unquote, channeling, or we could say automatic writing. I basically wrote down about 50 pages of notes of all the things I was thinking about and reconstructing within myself, and all the things that came up. I would say, in a sense of automatic or intuitive writing, I put that into essays, and just I was formatting that and reading books and so on, and telling myself that, all right, I already have a glimpse now. I can see the main ideas. I'm really happy because I realized that I'm immortal just as everyone else in an ultimate sense. And it is all a game, and time and space are illusions. So that was
true. So true.
So that was the most important thing for me, because I was really worried about death, basically, and I felt it's something very off. I was very uncomfortable about this. So this was really, really great for me. And then upon formatting this in a more precise manner, I basically, quote unquote, stumbled across Bashar, because I was saying to myself, well, I like all of this information, but I want it even more easy, a lot easier and simpler. And it has to check out 100%, and it must be completely based on the idea of self-responsibility and absolute empowerment. And, that is like vibration to like vibration, what I attracted, which then again played back to me the things I was already kind of sensing or assuming in the most concise manner. I was so happy to finally have found one conduit where I would say, at least for myself, it's checking out almost 100%. And even that which is not checking out is kind of moderated by his own statements of being wary of that and understanding that properly. And to be very honest, as latest from that point, then I completely restructured my life, and I have never looked back, I can tell you.
That's a good
this
moment.
Was about just to be clear, this was in 2012, 2013.
Those are good moments. I love those moments. Yeah. So I know that you I know that you speak to alien races, specifically the Sasani. What was your first experience with that? How did you connect to that particular being?
There's a few layers to this. So briefly, the very first time I quote unquote intentionally went into a channeling state, because the funny thing is I remember distinctively one time we were like, oh, let's play pretend to be channeling at some point, and the energy was off and there was, I was fumbling, there was nothing happening, and anyhow it just wasn't my plan to do that. So I remember have that memory, which is interesting. And maybe a bit after that, another funny correlation, always these stories. I drank ayahuasca, and then I kind of, got even more insight into these different levels and experience. And I kind of told myself, since I'm so attracted to this idea of doing some form of channeling, because I just enjoyed the whole formatting and many aspects of it so much, I was like, okay, why not just, start doing it, no matter what I'm actually doing. But if I'm so attracted to the idea, I shouldn't ignore that. I should follow my excitement, very simple. So that was maybe a year after discovering Bashar and all of that, even just a year, 2 years, about 2 years. And then I was in contact with Odyssey of Ascension, Roxanne Swainhart, and we were talking because I kind of felt she may be able to help me. And she just said, well, just start channeling now. I was kind of like, well, and 5 minutes later in our talk, she said, again, now all your guides are here, like they're just waiting for you now, channel. I was just closing my eyes, taking a breath and just starting to talk basically. And what was so interesting to me is the very, very first thing that came out was a description of the process itself. This was not connecting to anything specific, just, higher self, whatever. And was explaining how the only thing that's separating everyone from this type of connection is their own judgment, basically. For, judgment is the separating factor. And so also the channeling process itself and learning it and getting into it is very much about deconstructing negative beliefs to actually strengthen and improve the channel. So that was, on that level, my first experience. That would be one part of the answer if you'd like to comment or ask something specific.
Well, my first experience with that was with an angelic being, and the first couple times I did it, I really wondered whether I have a great imagination. I'm an artist. I've made my living making stuff up my whole life. So it was kind of a weird,
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Just maybe put it into context, and that's also kind of eased me into doing it that way, because otherwise I could be saying, yeah, I'm just pulling up random thoughts when I'm channeling, whatever. But precisely this point that Bashar also always likes to say, imagination is the conduit to your own higher mind. So while we may oftentimes then talk about, oh, are you just making this stuff up? Are you actually connecting to something outside of you? Well, number one, if we follow these ideas, there is nothing outside of you. And number two, all these things you say you're making up, they actually also are their discrete individual ideas. You're always connecting to something, quote unquote, else at the very same time. So I really think it's about here also getting more and more into this and or acceptance definition. I'm pretty sure you can get what I'm saying, but I think this can then also help within the process, because then it's not really the question, is it outside or inside, because everything is inside, but really just, again, are you doing it out of the proper alignment? And as a conduit, are you clear enough to get something that's truly, relevant, beneficial, or positive for you? That's kind of the way I see it.
Well, I find in the process, while I'm fully conscious, like you were saying, I'm fully conscious, I'm fully aware, I'm not like pushed out of the way into the back while someone else is talking. So, the first few times it was, I just had the feeling that it was as much, and the information coming through was stuff I really wanted to hear. So I was just a little bit suspect at first, but I agree with where you're going and the setup on it. And, I think that, yeah, that I didn't have a judgment on those experiences like, oh, that's me, that's not somebody else. But I did keep it on the table of possibilities at that moment. It wasn't a hardcore truth yet. And it took a few times to really realize and be able to sense that different, because the frequency when you actually connect with someone else is very different. and
Yeah,
and and coming up to that awareness was the thing that wound up like letting me feel more confident that it was an actual communication.
and maybe to explain a little more and give another aspect of the answer. So then for quite some time, I was mainly channeling actually your cards. I guess I'm probably the one who has most recordings of pulling up your cards and then channeling. So archetypes, just because I love tarot, and I was like, it's a great way to also be more intuitive about this. So connect with the archetypes. Then your lovely angels, of course. And in between, what I did is I got Lister Royal's Galactic Heritage cards deck, which is super amazing. 108 alien story cards, very positive and well-rounded and psychologically relevant for humans. So I channeled that. And then I said, okay, just in terms of kind of making it more comfortable for me as well and redefining the whole process, I would love to receive a name. And then maybe a week later, just lying down, and just as I lie down basically to sleep, I get this name, Ringo. And then there's a whole, backstory about that as well. That would be the other aspect or the other part where maybe, it's a different level of communication or a different layer maybe in some senses, even though even here, I specifically do not say this is a singular Sasani, whatever, because it's also not what I want to connect to, or probably even can, because they're all telepathically connected anyhow. So I kind of made it as a in between what I'm most comfortable with and what I would, love to come in, and also leave the definition open enough that everyone also talking to that entity, which also always says we, and in that we, I don't only include potentially, depending on the communication and level, the entirety of Sasani or other civilizations, but also me as a physical conduit. And that also really helps, to kind of dissolve all of the strange barriers. But then ultimately, what really matters to me is what is the result? So do individuals benefit in some senses? And any channelings I'm doing, while I am laying out some basic framework, and if there is an intuition or a strong message, I'm delivering that, also specifics if it comes up, but very much doing the very best to show everyone that they're already connected to their own higher self supremely, and that they don't need actually that which they're experiencing, however, that they can, enjoy it for the fun of it. And that's
it really is enjoyable.
And that's, it's having a conversation in your own mind, which anyhow you're always doing. And so in a sense, I'm just, in the channeling state, living out my natural proclivities in a certain sense, and put them in a framework that is more acceptable to do here. But most likely it also is channeling, because anyhow, always I felt connected to these ideas. And if I can choose them to be true, well, of course they must be true. And just in terms of general feeling, there's something behind it, no matter how ignorant I actually am in terms of specifics and the process, and maybe don't get what other mediums or whatever get, but I also even don't want that. However, then ultimately, when this is happening and afterwards individuals are feeling great, there is a market shift in frequency, or someone enters the room later and is like, oh, you had a session, oh, it must have been really good. And apparently it was, no matter what I'm saying about it. That just shows me that, some positive or lighter energy is coming through. And then all I can say is, quote unquote, for the role I choose to play in that now, I have served my purpose.
Awesome. Well, channeling is a really rewarding way to flow for me. I enjoy it, love it, have really.
And it is energizing as well. Also for me personally, that's the other cool thing, and it's fun.
Yes, indeed. Doing the medium thing, very different. It's energy draining rather than energizing, which is, I've always thought was rather curious.
I have a theory right now about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So assuming that we have these different layers of consciousness, and even though I would say again, everyone simultaneously exists on all levels in some way, shape or form, it's about the matter of individual focus. And now let's say, if we say that these type of connections, when they're intentional in that way, create an energy bridge between two entities. Of course, ultimately there is infinite energy through unconditional love, but we are now speaking about the perspectives of separation, limitation, and also ignorance, of course. So then, assuming that within that it maintains a certain equilibrium, then I would assume someone connecting to a quote unquote version of an entity, even though they may already be a soul as well or jump around on other planets, but also a version that is, let's say, a stuck banshee ghost and they're really traumatized and still need to fix some things, then I would say that entity has an energy deficit or energy management issue. So then me connecting to it or someone connecting to it as a living entity on that level, if I look at, let's say, then the human, let's say, would have a charge of 100 and the quote unquote ghost has a charge of 20. So you may be going down to an absolute charge of 60. So the human later may feel drained, especially maybe if they don't put up their filters right.
Very, very, very
however,
true.
At the same time, if I'm deliberately saying all connections only go through my higher self, or even through this, then I'm doing the very best to tune myself to even quote unquote higher light beings or more energy rich, more consciousness, awareness, love aware entities, then they would be like on 200, 300. So probably I can't even handle that much, but then I'm rather going to be coming out at 120 than at 60.
Wholeheartedly agree with that whole scenario. And like when I channeled the angels to do the angel cards, oh my word, I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed up all night.
Yeah, I usually got that issue also. I mean, yeah, exactly. So
yeah. Well,
but that's cool. Just to say one brief thing about it, and everyone knows this who's acting on their excitement once again, and because it's all channeling in some way, shape, or form. But it's also kind of nice because it shows you, life can be so fun. Life can be such a wonderful dream that you don't even want to go to bed anymore.
I used to joke with somebody, like, this was right after I started doing my first effect, and I was just supercharged like all the time. And I said, dude, I don't want to go to bed because I think I'm going to miss something, and I can't wait to wake up because I think I'm going to miss something. It was that level of ecstasy about your life, man. That's when you get to really, that's really living.
Ecstatic.
Yes, exactly. Ecstatic. And that energy, man, that energy is so like pure, and the fantastic thing about that, just like there are vicious circles, where things go in a downward spiral. When you hit those levels of ecstasy, it's an upward spiral, higher and higher and higher. And there would be times I just didn't think my body could contain it all. I might just pop and go somewhere else, and was happy to do that because it felt so good.
And you did.
I did, and I never came back.
Right. And because that again you'd be putting it together again, and here it's not even about dematerializing, but just connecting, as I would put it, to a different parallel earth reality congruent with the new frequency you set. And then everyone experiencing these accelerations, if you're then really self-honest and conscious and also take care maybe of the new level of detail you have in terms of cleaning out your engine, then it's just great, because then you may be again stumbling a little bit because of the new speed and getting used to it. But if then you're really honest and take care of it and don't take it as a sign like, oh my God, now the world has become darker just because your eyes have become sharper, and kind of keep that in balance and I would almost say keep the faith, but only in yourself. Then
do you
it can be a fun ride.
Do you keep a diary? I keep a journal about all of my experiences, and not lengthy pages and pages, but I write down times and details and the pieces I got. And I've found, going back over the years, that those are kind of really useful little TV screen into that whole little journey. Do you do that also? I know you video a lot of your stuff.
Well, this aspect I did for especially this half a year between my, let's say, matrix breaking experience and encountering Bashar. That's when I wrote a lot. Then also later for some time, it really helped me. Right now, I'm not exactly sure if that is the process I want to go about it. However, in general, it is super useful, and of course also can greatly accelerate the ability to remember dreams. So it's again about how someone wishes to play the game. But in general, I can just confirm that that can be a very, very great and effective tool if anyone is excited to do that. For me, it's also almost kind of like I don't necessarily need to know it in that sense. And I'm also quote unquote happy with my reality just randomly unlocking things. So I don't need to write them down. Not that otherwise they couldn't change, but I'm also kind of okay with that mode. But certainly, as you say, writing it out and so on can give, great context and great clarity and really accelerate the processes, because even just writing about it and putting back focus on these ideas in that way is really reinforcing also any quote unquote subconscious mechanisms for connection.
The thing I really enjoy about it is when you get like a distance, like 2, 3, 4 years on something, those early experiences for me really tend to fade a little bit. And you remember kind of some generalities, but being able to go back through those little journals and like, ooh, and see kind of the evolution of it has been really enjoyable. And the scientist in me just won't take any other answer. Write it down. Okay, no worries. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just contemplating this archetype. So it's either the scientist, I would actually have said it's a scribe.
Yeah, well, he's the one that's writing it down. The scientist is dictating.
True.
The scribe, number 14.
Number 14?
You remember the numerology book? Yeah, the Dusty Bunker. Do you ever get that? The numerology, book, long time ago. Yeah,
yes. Just to mention, this is Dusty Bunker and Faith Gervain, The Divine Triangle. Again, supposedly channeled, automatic written or whatever material by Pythagoras. Yes. Ultimately.
Yes.
Great, highest recommendation. I got it also from Bryan originally, and I read it in full. It's also available online, and then I gave it to a dear friend along with the tarot book, just because it's the very best introduction to numerology, astrology, and
the tarot.
The tarot, of course, yes.
Yeah. Well, number 14 in that book, the first line of the description of that number, this is the number of the scribe. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool, because just before I was calculating your Wizard of Odd, and I was only like, okay, Wizard of what? And Wizard of ODD is 644, and that's of course 14.5. So here we go again.
I have a curious numerological factoid. I've done thousands of number charts over the years, and my mom and dad's were the bizarrest collection of two people's numbers I've ever seen. My dad's, first of all, were his outer personality number and his soul number were both 59, which reduces to 14, which reduces to 5. So those two middle numbers were exactly the same. And then my mom's name changed her name to Lahr at the end when she got married, and when that changed her numbers, then her numbers changed to those two middle numbers, both being 59, 14, 5 as well. So when you look at their charts together, like all four of those numbers are exactly the same. Never seen that before or since. Just kind of a crazy weirdness. And, I don't know if you've actually done the Divine Triangle thing from that book, where you carve out the squares of your life, of chunks of time, like 27-year chunks. And the very first square is your youth square, and what your getting to set yourself up to make it in the world. And for me, the number of that youth square was 14.5. That number comes up for me a whole lot, actually.
Yeah, I actually made that calculation. I hope I'll find it again or just do it again. Your mic is still on, just to let you know. Yes. All right. So, yeah. Do you have anything further to add? We have about, let's say, 5 more minutes if you want to play a bit more music. Anything else about, well, all of these wonderful ideas, tarot, channeling, numerology, mediumship, also just great to show they all kind of belong together and they're all, well, connected in some way, shape or form.
They are indeed. And I just pulled a quick card for the Saturn Pluto conjunction and what's just a little piece of advice on the best way to get through it. And I pulled the Ace of Wands. So have energy and
my favorite card.
Right? I love that card. I love that card. I love that card. I love that card. So I toss out some hope there for a productive and happy ride.
Light it up.
Yeah. So I'm excited about moving into the next phases, and I've got some new stones I want to talk to you about next time too. Some really amazing little beasts. Great. So that's pretty much all I can bend your ear for today. So thank you so much as always. I so enjoy these, and I have, heard from a number of people in connection with it through the Wizard of Oz site, and thank you to all you people who've sent me comments and stuff. I really, really appreciate it, and hope you're getting something worthwhile out of our rambles.
Yes, thank you all so much. Thank you, Bryan, so much for channeling all of us, for doing the very same, following our excitement, tuning ourselves to the frequency we wish, including this conversation. So also, of course, I agree with Bryan. I very much wish you that you gain what you are seeking. You find it within yourself somewhere here or somewhere else within yourself. And as you basically now confirmed my tentative music choice through drawing the 27 Ace of Wands, once again, one of my very, very favorite cards. Even just about this card, I could be talking for a whole hour, I guess.
27. Yeah, no kidding, right? You could go on forever about this one.
Yeah, and even personal experiences. So anyhow, without further ado, we thank you very much once again. Once again, thank you, Bryan. And the last tune for tonight is going to be Kendrick Lamar. Section 18, 80 is the album, and the track is called Blow My High. Enjoy.
Radio OKiTALK, Radio OKiTALK, von Mensch zu Mensch.